In the spring of 1995, at the very first Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles, Sega of America's president Tom Kalinske walked on stage and made an announcement that stunned the video game industry. The Sega Saturn was not launching in September, as Sega had told the entire industry for months. It was launching that day. It was already on store shelves. It should have been the greatest ambush in console history. A total surprise, 4 months ahead of Sony's PlayStation, timed to seize the entire holiday narrative before Sony could say a word. Instead, it became one of the most damaging launches in gaming history. And Tom Kalinske, the man standing on that stage, had argued against it from the very beginning. Every week we tell the stories of the consoles, studios, and engineering decisions that shaped the video game industry and what happened when the market moved on. Subscribe if that history matters to you. The story begins in Japan, more than a year before that stage in Los Angeles. Sega's console division had already committed to a specific philosophy for its next machine, one built to bring the company's dominant arcade technology into American living rooms. Sega's arcade boards, running games like Virtua Fighter, were producing real-time 3D graphics that no home console on the market could match. The Saturn was designed to be an extension of that arcade hardware, not a clean-sheet home console built around a single unified processor the way its rivals would be. That decision shaped everything that followed. The Saturn's architecture, finalized in Japan, was built around 2 Hitachi SH2 processors running in a master and slave configuration, supported by 2 separate custom video display processors. One, called the VDP-1, handled sprites, textures, and polygon rendering. The other, the VDP-2, handled backgrounds and scrolling planes. In total, the Saturn combined 8 separate processing units working in parallel: twin CPUs, twin graphics processors, a sound processor, an audio-digital signal processor, and dedicated memory controllers. On paper, it sounded like an enormous amount of power. In practice, it created a problem that would quietly undermine the entire platform. The 2 SH2 processors could not access memory at the same time without conflicts. To use the Saturn's full power, a developer had to manually split their game's workload between the 2 chips by hand, a slow and unfamiliar process for studios that had built their entire pipeline around single-processor machines. Early multi-platform games frequently used only one of the 2 SH2 chips, leaving roughly half the console's processing power completely untapped. Sega had also, before finalizing this design, explored a very different path entirely, joining forces with Sony. Sega of America's own research and development team had worked with Sony on the specifications for a potential joint hardware platform, an arrangement that would have split the enormous financial risk that came with building game console hardware. Sony's president at the time agreed the idea made business sense, but Sega of Japan doubted Sony was serious about actually building hardware, and the talks collapsed. By November of 1994, the Saturn launched in Japan, priced at 44,800 yen, and performed strongly, eventually outselling every rival machine in that market for years to come. But Japan was not the fight that would define the Saturn's legacy. America was. The Saturn's North American launch had originally been scheduled for September 2, 1995, a date Sega had marketed for months under the tagline Saturn Day. But executives in Japan grew nervous about ceding any advantage to Sony and pushed for an earlier date. Tom Kalinske pushed back hard. He had built Sega's American success with the Genesis on careful marketing timelines and a real retail rollout, and he argued that launching without proper preparation, without enough hardware, without enough software, and without warning to retailers would backfire. He was overruled. On May 11, 1995, at that first E3, Kalinske delivered the announcement Japan had directed him to make. 30,000 Saturn consoles, priced at $399, were already sitting on shelves in exactly 4 retail chains. Every other retailer in the country, every chain that had not been given advance warning, from Walmart to Kmart to Best Buy, found out about the launch at the exact same moment as the general public. Many of those retailers, blindsided and frustrated at being excluded from a launch they had no chance to prepare for, refused to stock Sega products for months afterward. Then Sony took the stage. Sony's American executive, asked to discuss the PlayStation's pricing, walked to the microphone, said a single number, $299, and walked away. $100 cheaper than the Saturn, announced in roughly 5 seconds, immediately after Sega's carefully engineered surprise. It remains one of the most quoted moments in the history of the video game industry, and it instantly reframed Sega's ambush as a liability rather than a victory. The damage went beyond a single afternoon. Third-party developers who had been told the real launch date was September suddenly had 4 fewer months to finish their Saturn games than they had planned for. Many titles shipped incomplete, delayed, or were never localized for the American market at all. The console that was supposed to launch backed by a wave of software instead launched into a near-empty release schedule, while retailers who felt betrayed by the surprise slowed their support even further. In 1996, Tom Kalinske left Sega of America. His replacement, Bernie Stolar, arrived from Sony's own PlayStation division and made a decision that would further narrow the Saturn's already struggling software library. Stolar believed that role-playing games and many Japanese-style titles had limited appeal to American audiences, and he restricted the localization of many Saturn games that were popular and successful in Japan. By 1997, with Sega already quietly developing what would become the Dreamcast, Stolar made a public comment that became infamous among Sega fans: "The Saturn is not our future." It was less a prediction than a public admission that the company itself had already moved on from the console it was still supposed to be selling. Once that comment reached the press and the fan community, remaining third-party support and consumer confidence evaporated almost entirely. The final numbers tell the story plainly. Worldwide, the Sega Saturn sold approximately 9.26 million units over its lifetime. Of those, 5.75 million sold in Japan, where the console remained on sale until the year 2000. In the United States, the Saturn sold only 1.8 million units. In Europe, just 1 million. Sony's PlayStation, launched 4 months later at a lower price with a stronger third-party lineup, would go on to sell more than 100 million units worldwide, becoming one of the best-selling consoles in history. Sega discontinued the Saturn in North America and Europe in March of 1998. The console that Tom Kalinske stood on stage to launch early, against his own judgment on the direct order of Sega's Japanese leadership, had beaten Sony to store shelves by 4 months. It had on paper more raw processing power than its rival. It had access to Sega's own arcade technology that had made Virtua Fighter one of the most advanced fighting games ever built. And within 3 years, it had been abandoned by its own leadership, discontinued in every major market outside Japan, and reduced to a footnote in the console war it was supposed to win. Kalinske would later say that Sega would still be relevant today had the original joint venture with Sony been approved by Japan. Instead, the two companies that could have shared the risk of building the future of home gaming became each other's fiercest rivals, and only one of them survived the war that followed. The Saturn was never beaten by weaker hardware. It was beaten by a launch it wasn't ready for, a partnership that never happened, and a company that gave up on its own console before its customers ever had the chance to.